Y'all better buckle up today because we're going to tell you a wild gunslinging story from the summer of 1905. It's got everything: a Wild West show, saloons, real shootouts, and a real attack on a train. Hello folks, I'm Steve Gilly along with Rod Mullins, and this is, yes, another one of those stories of Appalachia.
I think the only thing we were probably missing out of this description about having everything was probably showgirls or can-can girls.
I'll have to say, no, we don't have can-can girls. So I guess maybe we don't have everything.
We don't have everything with it. But, you know, when you started talking Wild West show, saloons, I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for the can-can girls or the saloon girls to come into this. But no, we got into real shootouts and a real attack on a train. I never heard about this. Had never heard anything about something like this taking place, but it happened in, of all places, West Virginia.
Well, wild, wonderful West Virginia. That's all I can say.
Amen. Let's get on with this story.
Okay. Well, I do want to say before we get started, though, a lot of folks don't know this. We are now on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
So come by and follow us on Blue Sky. We had met another person on Blue Sky who is a local historian up in West Virginia, and this person recommended that we look into this story. And I thought, wow, this is right up our alley. So folks, sit back and enjoy this, because today we're heading back to a time when the Wild West wasn't confined to dusty plains and tumbleweeds. It was right here in Appalachia, all courtesy of a traveling Wild West show. This is the story of Texas Bill's Wild West show and how a sightseeing trip to Richwood, West Virginia turned into one of the most chaotic train rides you'll ever hear about.
It's the summer of 1905. Texas Bill's Wild West show is traveling through Ohio and into West Virginia, putting on performances that they just simply wowed crowds all over the place with cowboy theatrics, trick riding, trick shooting, and a taste of that iconic Western lifestyle that was idolized in the East back then. Well, on July 9th, the troupe had set up camp in Cowan, West Virginia, a small community nestled in the Appalachian Hills. It was just another stop on the tour. Well, so they thought. That day, a group of the performers decided to take a break from the show and hopped on an excursion train operated by the B&O Railroad, that is Baltimore and Ohio for some of you train sticklers out there, to visit Richwood, a bustling lumber town nearby.
Why, you might ask, would a group of rough and tough Western cowboys want to go to a little Appalachian lumber town? Well, folks, it turns out that in 1905, Richwood wasn't just a lumber town. It had a reputation for being a little, shall we say, spirited, as in haints and other things that go bump in the night. You see, there were tales of a haunted house there they wanted to see. And more importantly for this story, though, was this. It was also a place where a cowboy could find a stiff drink, that's some other kind of spirit, you know, and a little bit of excitement. Now, one of the performers, a man known as Mexican Bill, real name George Hooper, found himself in a Richwood saloon. And, well, let's just say things didn't stay peaceful for long. Mexican Bill was the quintessential cowboy with a flair for dramatic horseback riding and a reputation for being a little bit too bold. While enjoying his drink, a local woman spotted him and exclaimed, "Why, there's the handsome cowboy rider." She introduced herself and shook his hand.
You know, Steve, that description kind of reminds me when we talk about the flair for the dramatic and reputation for being a little too bold. It almost describes Sam Elliott. You know, the guy with the deep voice and stuff. Beef, it's what's for dinner. You know, I mean, that's kind of like what I'm thinking of with this. But this, of course, did not set well with her male companion. We're talking about the guy that was with the lady when she said, "Why, there's that handsome cowboy rider." Okay, well, words were exchanged, and it wasn't the friendly kind of words either. But this was just the appetizer for the chaos that was about to erupt. After boarding the train for the return trip to Cowan, tensions began to escalate. A fellow performer named Oscar Knight, known to history as, get this, Mr. Flute Player. Mr. Flute Player. Okay. Named by the press and who, yes, played the flute in the show, like you couldn't guess that, named by the press and who, yes, as I said, played that flute, decided to stir the pot. He insulted that same lady from the saloon and grabbed her arm, which quickly caught the attention of the railroad police and a local constable. And as you can guess, the situation soon spiraled out of control. You know, I was almost in one of those situations the other night, Steve, but that's another story for another day.
We'll just keep that quiet.
Yeah, we'll keep that quiet. So, Knight started shouting and causing a ruckus. So the officers arrested him and removed him from the train at Camden-on-Golly.
Well, Rod, that wasn't the end of it, though. As Mr. Flute Player was being taken off the train, a local resident tried to intervene and ended up getting arrested, too. Meanwhile, Mexican Bill wasn't about to let his buddy's arrest slide. Back on the train, he loudly threatened the officers, saying he'd knock their block off when they got to Cowan. And sure enough, when the train reached Cowan, things almost quite literally exploded. Mexican Bill rallied his fellow showmen, and they armed themselves with rocks, guns, and Wild West bravado. At first, the officers managed to isolate Bill, arrest him, and shove him into the rear coach of the train, which they used as a makeshift jail. But the cowboys weren't done. Bill's comrades shouting, "We're Wild West, man!" and waving their guns in the air, stormed the train. Some even tried to hold up the engineer, while others attempted to uncouple the rear car.
I close my eyes and I visualize blazing saddles. I mean, seriously, it's like all of this ruckus and everything going on at the same time. Well, what followed was a scene straight out of a dime novel. I didn't say a bad word. I said a dime novel. That's what they used to be. Well, the cowboys opened fire on the train, shattering windows and battering doors. Inside, passengers scrambled for cover, dropping to the floor behind the seats, praying as the bullets were flying by. And in the chaos, something tragic and ironic happened. One of the cowboys, John Johnson, accidentally shot another showman, this time Mexican George, in the back of the head while aiming for the officers. Mexican George, whose real name was Lloyd Schaefer, died instantly. His death threw the group into further disarray, but the shootout continued. The train crew, well, they were trying desperately to end the bloodshed, moved a freight train between the warring parties. But that didn't even stop the cowboys, because one of them attempted to crawl under the train to uncouple the cars, but well, he tragically misjudged the timing, and you guessed it, he was crushed beneath the wheels.
Well, Rod, when the dust settled, 2 cowboys were dead, Mexican George and William Rollins, both from Iowa. Several others were injured, including Mexican Bill, who was badly beaten by railroad officers during his arrest. So what happened next? Well, Mexican Bill was taken to Clarksburg, where he received medical attention and was jailed. Despite his injuries, he was transported to Webster Springs in Webster County to avoid a lynch mob waiting for him in Cowan. He was eventually tried and fined just $5 for his role in the disturbance. Mr. Flute Player, the man who started the whole mess, was tried and found guilty of disorderly and riotous conduct and fined as well, with his fine being paid by the manager of the Texas Bill Wild West show.
Meanwhile, John Johnson, the cowboy who accidentally shot Mexican George, was charged with murder. The bodies of the 2 dead Wild West performers were sent back to their homes in Iowa, while the rest of the show left Cowan and moved on to Sutton, though it was clear the incident had left its mark. And I'll tell you, from all of this was cascading. This was one of those things of what I would teach in class, in English class. This is rising action. And then you reach that summit, and then whew, everything goes downhill after that. And that's what was going on with this. This is a story that just amazes me. And, we've made references before on here, and we've talked about Appalachia being, in some ways, the real Wild West about things. This kind of had to have some transplants, per se, some people from Iowa coming in here, but man, I'm telling you, what shambles everything got into after this.
Well, these guys just, I guess, took their Wild West personas for real and took action like they figured cowboys would. Now, I don't know anything about them. They could have actually been cowboys out west, or they could just have been actors who were hired to perform these bits. It's hard to tell, but yeah, they took this whole thing seriously, and it just escalated out of control. Now, I know we're going to get people commenting, whatever happened to Mr. Johnson? The guy that was charged with murder.
Right.
I don't know.
Wow.
Because that disappeared. That information vanished. I also want to say that there are all kinds of stories about this that say that nobody knows who the flutist was. And I could be wrong, but there was a newspaper that I looked at from Clarksburg that did name him, and that's the name that I put in here. Now, I'm no historian. Rod's no historian. We just guys that like to talk history. That could be wrong, so take that with a grain of salt, but that is the source that we had for the name of the flutist that was in this story.
This is almost, thinking back to my childhood, this is almost like a bad dream gone wrong at Tweetsie Railroad or Silver Dollar City. Yeah. I mean, these guys, at Tweetsie and also at Silver Dollar City at that time when they were doing this sort of thing, man, they played it to the hilt. And I can remember going to Tweetsie and being, kind of scared out of my wits at first. And it's like, they had to grab me and say, no, it's okay. It's okay. They're acting. But these guys weren't acting, even though they did that in their show, but they weren't acting when it came down to the real thing, were they, Steve?
That makes me think about this. You talk about Tweetsie Railroad, Rimrock Railroad over there near Norton. Yeah. Those guys fired blanks.
Yep.
What were these guys doing with loaded guns? You reckon they were using loaded guns in the Wild West show that they were performing?
Good question. I don't know. That kind of makes me wonder about things. I can understand you're doing some target practice on certain things, and you're trying to maybe put a bullet in somewhere on a target and try to drive the bullet on top of the already shot bullet that you put through there. But it's almost like it was an ego thing. It was like, we're going to town, we're going to strap on our guns, and we're going to put our bullets in here, and we're going to be ready for anything. And sure enough, it happened.
Wow. Crazy story, but again, that's right up our alley.
Yep.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for more stories of Appalachia. Thanks for listening. You'll find us on your favorite podcast app and on our YouTube channel. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.